Hello all, Alison here and welcome back to Words and Pictures. I'm going to have a few minutes of fun today with some Crackle paste because I love Crackle, and I'm just going to work with some very simple panels that I'm going to make using one of these Tim Holtz backdrop papers. I'm going to use that as my substrate, and I say I'm going to have a few minutes of fun today. I may or may not finish today because one of the things with Crackle paste is you really have to let it do its own thing. It's no good drying it with a heat tool because it won't crackle. You'll just get smooth texture paste. It needs time. So I may be finishing these today, or what I may do is start them today, leave the Crackle to do its thing, and then come back tomorrow to finish the video with a few minutes of fun. So in all, it's a few minutes of fun with a few hours of drying time in between. Anyway, to create my substrate, I'm just going to cut this into 4. So in half, and then in half again. And because in the long run, what I probably want to do is add some word stickers that are going to be mostly horizontal lines. Even though the writing on this is going this way, I'm going to be turning them this way, just because that's the direction I want my composition to work in today. I very often work on tags, which is basically that sort of format, portrait, but I'm going to work landscape, and in order to not have it just all match up, where that one's that way up, I think I'm going to turn that one that way up, that one's going that way, so let's have that one going that way. And then I've already got my variation across my surfaces as I was wanting, as I often want. So with applying the Crackle paste, it's really very simple. You need your Crackle paste, and there are various makes of this. This is the Ranger, it's gorgeous, it's opaque, and this is the opaque one I'm using, so it will be solid Crackle. I'm also a huge fan of the Deco Art one. There's an amazing one that Andy Skinner created when he was designing for Deco Art, which is their media Crackle paste, and there are various versions of that. So there's a paste, there's a paint, and there's a glaze, and we'll maybe talk about the differences between those another day. This is a few minutes of fun. That's going to be more of a dive in deep technical. And I just want some Crackle on here that I'm going to apply through a stencil so that I've got a little bit of extra texture detail. And again, compositionally, I've got that one kind of sitting topish, leftish. So I'm now going to go bottomish, rightish, a similar sort of blob of stenciling. Very rough around the edges. I like it rough around the edges. Maybe bottom leftish. You can see this is still my first gobbet of texture paste. I'm going to need a little bit more now. It's really like spreading butter. It's that simple. That's way too much of a straight line going on up there. So before I go any further, I'm just going to mess up the edges of that. Maybe mess up the edges of that a little bit and not have this come right to the edge. And then finally, what do I want? Top right-ish. Just have that spread across there. And then any that's left on the palette knife that I don't want or need can just go straight back in the pot. Better if it doesn't sit too much at the rim because then it's going to dry out. Lid on, straight back on. And the other thing is I'm going to want to rinse this stencil pretty darn quickly so that doesn't dry on there. But that's really for today or for this filming session going to be it. I've got, let me just see if I can, there we go. I've got my 4 panels, little bit of Crackle paste just spread through the stencil onto them, and I'm now going to leave those to do their Crackle magic, and I'll be back when they're done to just add some little extras to these collaged panels. And here we go, the next day, and the Crackle has all nicely crackled. Considerably greyer day out there today. It's a very fine coat of Crackle, which means you get quite fine crackle pattern. It's very subtle, and one of the ways that you can highlight that texture, just as with any normal texture, is to get some liquid media on it that'll go down into the cracks. In fact, I'm quite inclined to do the first thing as just a spritz of something. Let's see what we've got. Maybe a spritz of Faded Jeans. This is Distressed Oxide spray. Not entirely sure that's what I want to do. What I might do, rather than spray it direct onto the, having, she says, dripping it straight on, what I might do, a little bit of water, we'll sort that out, or most of it out. And now I've got a beautiful blue splodge. Good, excellent. It's all going splendidly today. Not to worry, we'll incorporate it. What I was going to say is, rather than spray it direct onto those, what I'm going to do is give myself a little spritz on the mat, like so. A little dab of the nozzle, and then use a brush to add it to the texture. And as soon as I add it to the texture, you start to see how the texture will pop. It's a soft colour, the Faded Jeans Oxide. It's lovely, gentle. It's got almost a hint of lilac to it. And you can see I'm now starting to spread it out so that we're going to take into account that nice splodge that ended up down there. In fact, what I might do, since there's some left on the mat and it's nice and dropletty, is I might grab my splatter brush, which is the scrabby old one, and just pop a couple of sprinkles of that on. And yeah, we've almost dealt with that. I mean, it's barely going to show once the rest of everything is going on anyway. So this is completely unexpected. I was thinking I would go sort of green and turquoise. You can see I've pulled a couple of greeny turquoisey paints out, but at the moment I'm happy to go with Faded Jeans. And yeah, I can dab back where I don't want so much. So you can see that's soaking in quickly. That's because that's untreated paper, so that goes straight in. The other thing I've done that I meant to mention is I've stuck them down to a little bit of cardboard packaging. It's quite a good idea to do that before you put the Crackle on, and then that'll stop your paper curling up. I did it afterwards, and as you can see, I've now got 4 slightly more solid panels. I quite like that gives them just a bit more presence in the world as well, rather than just being scabby little bits of paper. I do want a little bit of this as well. So this is Dina Wakley mixed media paint. This is the turquoise. I've got peacock sitting there as well, but I'm again just adding some water to that, and I'm just going to give some little speckles, I think, of that rather than the full on. And it's just so that we've got some different kind of colorways going on. Yes, we're still in my happy colors. One of these days I'll do something orange and red and pink, and you'll think you're on the wrong channel. It probably won't happen till autumn, to be fair, because that's when the oranges tend to arrive here. And as you can see, can't resist with a bit of paint on the mat, adding some extra. This is what playing is. This is seeing a thing on the mat and going, oh well, what if? What if? People are often asking me questions down below. What would happen if I did X? Well, I have some idea of it, but my main answer is do it and find out. What have you got to lose? It's a bit of paint and a bit of paper. What would happen if X? Well, that's the question I'm asking myself all the time, and I just do it to find out what happens if X. And if I were an orderly sort of person, I'd probably keep a journal going, oh, and then I did this and this happened, so now I know that for the future. But what I do rather than that is I keep the pieces themselves, and looking back at them gives me a chance to see what's what, to look back and go, oh, well, that was quite a nice effect. I wonder if I can revisit that or recreate that. And sometimes I can recreate it successfully. And sometimes I create a whole new thing along the way. And that's playing. That is creativity. Creativity, I think, is what if and following through on it. So yeah, we're just building little bits of texture in those backgrounds. I think I'd like quite a strong sort of horizontal composition in these. So I'm going to go with a bit of design tape. These are from a lovely Finnish store, or some of these. This is a mixture of Tim Holtz and a beautiful Finnish company called Paper Garden. I will put links in the description below if you're interested. They have some really lovely things. So what I very often do with tissue or design paper or design tapes is, rather than put them on as solid blocks, as you'll see there, I tend to give them a little rip vertically, and then that gives me jaggedy edges to play with, which for me is just a bit more interesting than a solid straight block. So that's, maybe I'll go with this slightly paler one for the other two, I think, just for interest's sake. Variation, so one set of repetition, one set with variation. I'm going to go down quite a long way on this one, I think. So again, I'm varying position as I go, just trying to create compositional change across the pieces. And I've slightly messed myself up because I'm going to end up with two that are down and two that are up and all that kind of business. But you know, it is what it is. Some days the composition just looks after itself. Oh, look, and what I've cleverly done, I honestly didn't plan that, is I've managed to stick my tissue paper straight over that blotchy bit there. I told you it wasn't going to show in the long run. So that's a little bit of horizontal composition, structure, what I would think of as the structure, architecture of the collage. It gives me somewhere to rest things. I'm just wondering about a bit of brown. I don't think I want it at the moment. We might come to brown. But what I am now hankering after is a bit more green on the texture. So I'm going to bring in one of the Tim Holtz distress crayons. This is peeled paint. And what's lovely about these is you can just apply them direct. And you can see that's giving me a kind of hit of dark as well as green over this, and it's got a sort of mossy quality to it. The distress crayons remain reactive with moisture until they've dried. Once you've dried them, they're going to stay dry, but until then you can take a little bit of water. I quite often do just on my finger a little bit of water, and you can move that colour around. So we're now getting sort of mossy walls, crackled old. Once the water's down, as soon as you apply the pigment, it's already going to be responding to that. You don't have to move it around. If you like the really full-on gnarliness of it applied just as it is, you can absolutely do that. I'm just dipping my finger straight in the water jar now to move around this. And you can see what it does is, again, it's just getting in all the nooks and crannies of that textured stenciling, as well as just creating a sort of mossy greenery, which is pleasing me quite a lot. It's like an old country churchyard sort of look. Old brick wall, old stone wall with moss and lichen, and which means that I can grow stuff up it in a minute. maybe some flowers and maybe some, yeah, see, I'm really enjoying how that's spreading out. It's fairly random, but you can see I'm going up from the washi and down from the washi. It's an automatic, again, sort of compositional spreading out for me of that colour. They've all got quite a lot. That one's got not quite as much, and I'd like it to come down into and along the washi tape a bit. There we are. Move that around, and so you see, until it's completely dry, I can still move it around. I can still get a bit of play with that. I want to move this, and I'm just kind of looking, and I'm seeing where there's still quite a lot of distressed crayon in lumps or clumps. And I like the lumps and clumps as well, don't get me wrong. I don't want to lose all of that scrumptious texture, but I want to also use that pigment to create the mossiness elsewhere. Yeah, I'm quite enjoying the sort of lovely random growth of the moss and the lichen, so I think I'll dry those. And you can see the washi tape is sort of peeling up at the edges. That's completely fine by me. In fact, sometimes I deliberately go in and peel up the edges of the washi tape. At the moment, I'm really enjoying the dark tissue tape, and I'm quite sad that this one is vanishing a little bit, but in the long run that may switch over. Once I've got the next thing on top, I may decide that actually I prefer the pale one. So it's tempting to dive in and go, oh no, I need dark washi on all of them, let me put some on. But I think it's really worth holding your nerve. And in terms of layers, I'm now quite sad that we've lost all of that lovely soft blue. So I've still got the Oxide here on the table, and I'm gonna, you've seen the applying sprays in two ways. We've done a third way today because we put it on the mat and then used a brush to apply it. And here's method 2 from the other video. If you haven't seen sprays 2 ways, you'll find that in the Few Minutes of Fun playlist. So I've unscrewed the nozzle, and I'm just tapping off some of that lovely oxide, fluid oxide formulation direct onto my panels, and that's making me very happy. I want to dry it before it vanishes. So these are quite big globules in some cases, so they would take a long time to dry, but where there's a particularly big one, I might choose to just dab it back a little bit. And you can see as soon as I dab it back, it softens the depth of colour. Those backgrounds are making me deeply happy. Really, really enjoying what's going on there. So I think what I might do is actually call it a day for this Few Minutes of Fun, having got myself these beautiful mixed media backgrounds. And what I will do is come back another day to finish off the collaging over the top. You can see I've got some things laid out to have a play with, but I think in terms of a few minutes of fun, that really has been a few minutes of fun, and I love it, and I want to give myself some thinking time and processing time before leaping into the collaging. And I want to spend some time just enjoying those backgrounds. There might be a final little flick to do. Of course, just a little dot of white. This is the PaperArtsy Fresco Snowflake. Probably the paint I go through the absolute fastest, even though I use it a dot at a time. That's not quite enough paint. That's too watery. That's going to vanish and not be white at all. A little bit more. So again, just the scrappy splatter brush. It's quite wet, and I'm going to add some little white sprinkles across these as well, because it's summer and there's sunlight and pollen floating through the air catching the sunlight, and it just gives me highlights and a contrast to those kind of rich dark greens underneath. You can see these are quite splattery and quite messy now, and I can't wait to get some collaging over the top of them, but you're going to have to be a little bit patient. I might go so far as to put the episode out a little bit more quickly with the follow-up episode of this. We'll see how things go in terms of scheduling, but I'm going to finish off with a zoom in on these backgrounds for you, so you can have a real look at the gorgeous texture that is going on in the crackled stencil, in the washi tape, and in all that lovely spattery, distress crayon-y goodness. I just don't want to cover them up yet, that's the thing. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing these backgrounds come together. I hope you'll rejoin me to see the collaging go on over the top. If you've enjoyed today, do hit the thumbs up button. If you've got comments or questions, I'd love to hear from you. And of course, if you haven't subscribed and you'd like to, that would be grand as well. I'll be back very soon with another few minutes of fun, but in the meantime, just take a close-up look at some of the texture we've created today. Happy crafting all.